You can't change what you don't understand. Think about it. If you don't understand you, the hood will gladly define you for you. And trust me, the hood does not give refunds. Every book or study course has an origin story. This one begins not in a library or a lecture hall, but in the quiet, unsteady space between who I was and who I knew I needed to become. Years ago, sitting with the weight of personal challenges, years of recovery from drugs and alcohol on one side and the growing urgency of those young folks I was working with, I realized that they were missing role models, even though I told them stories about the hood that they should not venture into. I was just someone they looked up to. But the truth? They didn't just hear the warnings. They saw the survivor. These young folks were hungry for guidance. They were watching me like I had all the answers, even when I was still trying to figure out the questions. So I kept telling them stories about the hood, thinking that this would warn them of the dangers, stories that meant to keep them out of the places I barely escaped. I found myself searching, as so many of us do, for a framework that could hold the full complexity of hood experience. I wanted something that was honest about how hard life can be, but equally honest about how extraordinary a person can be in response to that hardness of the hood. I wanted to tell them about how early childhood, that most times it begins with peer pressure and bullying, but they wanted to know how I did it, stayed sober, drug-free for all those years. They never once asked what books I read. I could not find exactly what I was looking for, because every book I read in my hood life always ended the same way. Gangster goes to jail, gangster goes to an institution, gangster dies. That was the script. That was the pattern. And I knew deep down I had escaped the last chapter of that story by inches. Those other books I read in recovery was either too deep for them or they were uninterested. I always said to them, you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that, because they didn't speak the language of the hood. They didn't speak the language of survival. They didn't speak the language of us. Then I told them about my hood life and my recovery. So I chose to, with the humility of someone who knows they are standing on many shoulders, I began to build it. I began to piece together my past and how I made it through while answering their questions. The Hoodsville D.A.R.E different framework emerged from years of conversation, study, reflection, and practice in classrooms and community centers, in counseling rooms and kitchen tables, in quiet early mornings with a journal, and loud afternoons with groups of young people who had every reason to give up and chose again and again not to. Each element of the framework was tested not in theory, but in life. Each letter of D.A.R.E carries the fingerprints of someone who needed it. That's why there is a level 1 and a level 2, for reasons that only added up to one thing. You can't change what you don't understand. I am grateful for every step of the way that I tailored each D.A.R.E level to the most asked questions. As I looked at this blueprint, I saw then that was exactly what I had done to remain sober all those early years until the present day, because I dared to be different. I wrote it down. The blueprint for D.A.R.E Be Different. This Resilience Bootcamp study course is designed to be read and worked with full engagement. D.A.R.E Be Different, because you can't change what you don't understand. Now there's work to be done. Let's go to work. For more information, contact Larry at www.hoodsville.com.